are. It is Thursday, May the 27th, and this is the really big class celebrating new music month, this month of May, and this is actually my final class of this masterclass series. So I say that, who knows, maybe I'll come back in the depths of winter when there's nothing to do. We'll see. Hopefully we won't find ourselves in lockdown again and won't have a true need for a respite on Thursday evenings. But anyway, I'm here with my guests Elisabeth Kufferath and Moritz Eggert, and we are going to explore some beautiful, colorful music from Debussy, Sciarrino, and from Moritz. And I just wanted to do a little bit of recap before I start asking my guests questions and putting them on the spot. So I think this is class number 38. I started to count and then I lost track and got distracted, but I think it's number 38. I started this series in April of 2020 when we all found ourselves suddenly home and with a lack of connection and a lack of motivation. And it's something that I'd wanted to do for a long time, bring together the people who I've crossed paths with in the 20 years I was in a string quartet. And it seemed like a really perfect situation in which to do that. And at first it was like, oh, Zoom, what's this Zoom thing? Maybe we can make it work. That was my initial thought. And now we're all Zoom pros and probably completely sick of it, but it's working better and better for our purposes. I think I've had 150 performers. I've had a few repeat guests, so probably something like 30 guests in total. We've explored music from, I think the earliest piece was by Bieber, and last week we had a world premiere. So really from the very beginnings of music for solo violin to today. We've had detours into jazz improvisation. We've gone to the very specialized world of orchestral excerpts several times. That was a big request, especially over the summer as people were preparing their excerpts for things. We've had some chamber music. String quartets have played in the really big class, and that was something that I didn't know if it would work, and it was actually extremely inspiring to hear groups. We had a group play in the class from Brazil, being taught by a teacher in Boston with me here in the UK. I mean, it's just been a great channel for connection in what has been a very odd year. I've met audience members in London who I've never seen face to face, and I can't wait to meet them in person. Gained supporters for the class, which have enabled things like the commission of a new work that was premiered last week by Clifton Ingram. And I'm just so grateful and have been incredibly inspired by those of you who have joined me here on Thursdays. So thank you very much. I wanted to finish the class off with this new music idea, which is something that's been very important to me in my own career and my own development as a musician. And really the thought has been that, at least my feeling about why it was important to bring it to the really big class, is that once you start playing music by living composers, living, breathing composers who you can go have dinner with and call on the phone and say, hey, what do you mean by this? Or send a text and get instant feedback. Once you have that experience, it changes, at least for me, it really changed the way I thought about music of Mozart and Bach and Beethoven and all of those guys. Because they too were living, breathing humans who could have coffee with their performers and discuss how things might work. And when I was in my string quartet and the Cypress quartet, we had a real sort of a mantra that sounds too formal. It wasn't that, but basically we felt like if we were playing new music as if it were old and old music as if it were new, we were on the right track. And we had the great privilege of putting these things side by side. And I thought, well, why not bring this to the really big class? Let's have brand new music played up against standard repertoire. We'll have a violinist who deals with both. We'll have a composer who's writing new things, and we'll bring it all together and just have an interesting discussion. So that's why May has been New Music Month. I hope that those of you who have watched and listened have enjoyed that. And I know that those of you who have played have gotten a lot out of it, and those playing today will too. So that's my spiel. On to the more interesting stuff. Elisabeth Kufferath, my friend from Cleveland days, and Moritz Eggert, who I'm meeting for the first time here. Welcome to the Really Big Class. I'll need both of you to unmute yourselves. That's the one thing I don't have control and power over.
Thank you for having us.
I'll start just by talking a little bit about Elisabeth, who I met at the Cleveland Institute of Music. We were classmates in the studio of Donald Weilerstein, and I spoke about this before when you taught the violin masterclass last summer, I guess it was. I will never forget hearing you play the Beethoven Violin Concerto in Cleveland. I remember the sound. I remember the way your fourth finger came down on this perfect note and the perfect vibrato, and I also remember sort of the calm and seriousness with which you played, and it made a huge impact on me. In the last year or two years or so, we've reconnected since I moved to the UK. I've been absolutely astonished and thrilled by the performances of yours I've seen online of brand new music. So I would love to ask you, and I told you I'd ask nice questions. So when did you have you always had an interest in playing contemporary music? Or is this something kind of new? Or could you tell us a little bit about your relationship with playing music of living composers?
Yeah, it's definitely not new. I think the fascination with composers has been with me since I can remember. And I actually almost feel like all composers are contemporary in a way. But I would say that when Dirk Nabering of the Berliner Festwochen asked me to learn the Berio violin sequenza, maybe that was actually the moment when I felt that I could express something special in that sort of area of music making, and I just loved the challenge of it being so violinistically virtuosic and theatrical and emotionally fulfilling and vulnerable and wild at the same time. And he also gave me some other opportunities to learn really out there pieces, like Lachenmann, Toccatina, which I at first actually had trouble kind of fulfilling the role of. And so I kind of eased into it just because I was asked to learn pieces over the years. But I would say that the teacher I had in Hamburg, where I grew up, my violin teacher, really ingrained in us this feeling that we were really responsible to fulfill what's written in the score and to really take incredibly seriously what the composer meant. And so it's always been so fascinating to me to read between the lines of all the dead composers. And so being able to work with a living composer, like you said, is just such a thrill and so meaningful.
Very cool. I'm just gonna ask a follow-up question, and then I'm gonna get to more. When you are approaching something new, and I should have written it down because the words that you just used were so beautiful. You talked about the vulnerability and the wildness that can coexist in a new work. And for me, that often comes from the sort of technical, like, how do I do this? How do I get these dots to come out on the violin? Because it's not always as obvious as it might be. Do you have, and I'm thinking about this too because I have a few students who are playing brand new pieces right now, and we're exploring them together. Like, how do you figure out how to make something sound? And do you have a routine in that way that helps you learn a composer's new language? When we look at Beethoven or Mozart, we kind of from looking at it, we know what it's going to sound like, even if we, you know, hopefully are changing our interpretations every time. But we know when we look at the page what that should, how that should sound. When I received the Sciarrino in the mail, which just came yesterday, I looked at it, and I haven't put my hands on it yet, but I looked at it and I thought, I don't know how this is going to sound. Can you talk about that feeling a little bit?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I would say that I have no method because I feel like every piece or every style, composing style, is, I mean, there can be such different extremes. And I guess if I think about looking at a piece by Beethoven, of course, I can hear more easily what the notes are going to be, but I still have to connect emotionally. And to me, that's always the clue, or that's what will, in the end, enable me to give a convincing performance. Also, is that I can read between the lines, and obviously, some composers write incredibly. I mean, like Alban Berg, he writes so much in his music that it's sometimes hard to look behind it and beyond all the small rubato markings that actually mean, you know, is rallentando, accelerando all the time, and it just kind of means a free rubato kind of playing. So even with him, who I think is such a romantic composer, it's actually, you have to almost get it in your muscle memory and deep down into your soul what you want to express, so you can free yourself from the music again. And so what I try to do, and it's sometimes easier and sometimes very difficult, is to connect with the music on an emotional level and to get into the story of it, or into the deeper meaning of it, as soon as I possibly can. So while deciding on fingerings, or while only being able to play it way under tempo, I also find it more fun, more fun to practice that way.
Yeah. Um, that's a lot. That's a lot to think about right there. Okay, I'm going to switch my focus. Moritz, time for me to talk to you and to ask you some questions. So I have to say, when I was looking for your biographical information, I found lots of things that looked very interesting and very long in German. And my German is
It's always long.
it's always my German is pretty much confined to ordering coffee and talking about how it's still raining. Um, my first trip to Germany, it rained the entire time, so we talked a lot about
That's right now,
as
actually.
regnant. But anyway, I did find I found an English language biography that I read, and I thought, okay, this doesn't really tell me the story. It tells me about his prizes and his operas, and my sort of initial reaction to what I found out about you, both through Elisabeth and through the wonders of Google, is that you seem like a person of great passions and intensity and a lot of ideas. I don't know why that's my impression, but it is. And I would love to know from you, when you're asked for a new piece, what do you do? I mean, this is always my question to a composer. Like, you've been asked to write a piece, and the composers I've worked with mostly have told me that they really like to be given constraints. Like, they like to know how long, they like to know where it might be programmed, who's playing it, that those things all help them sort of channel their idea making into a sort of stream. But at the end of that stream, you have to start putting dots on paper, and I wonder how that happens for you. Is that
That's
too
a good
vague?
question. I cannot answer that quickly. But interestingly, I had a discussion very similar with a student of mine today about this process. And she, a female student, she said that she finds it really difficult to work from a musical idea alone. She always needs some kind of topic, some kind of theme for her music. And that's when her imagination starts to roam and when she gets the ideas. And I think I'm very similar, actually. I don't think I need the constraints that you described so much, but what I need is really a pitch for the piece for myself, where I have the feeling, okay, this is what I really want to do. Because first of all, as you know, in the practice of composition, very often the commissions are very abstract, like writing a violin concerto for Elisabeth. Yeah, so of course I say yes. Yeah, as a wonderful performer, wonderful human being, I want to do it, but that's still not the piece, of course. Yeah, I wish it was, but it's not enough. So I have to think about it. And basically, what I try to do as a trick, and this is an advice I give to young composers, I actually have like 10 to 20 ideas for pieces in my head that I constantly think about, and I try to mature them a bit like a good whiskey or a good wine, and they are with me. So sometimes when I think about music, I constantly hear music anyway in my head. So sometimes I hear these pieces, and I have not even written them, and I don't even have a commission for them. They're just there. And when I get approached with a commission, or if musicians approach me to write a piece, then either it rings a bell somewhere in my head or it doesn't. And if it doesn't, then it might be that I say, okay, I don't know. I don't really feel inspired by this project, and I'm sorry. Yeah, you have to find the honesty to say that as well. If it doesn't grab you, sometimes you get proposals where you say, okay, this could be something interesting. And then I like to think about it. And the longer the process is that I think about a piece before actually starting to write it, the better. And I would compare it a bit to like Zen painters, Japanese painters' work. They contemplate for a month, sitting just there and staring at the canvas, and then they get up and they do, and then the picture is finished. Yeah, because they have so much prepared the moment of when they are going to paint, then that the painting itself is like the culmination of this process. And I like very much this idea. And once I have the piece, if the subject, if I have it grasped, then actually the process of composition can be relatively easy. I mean, it's never easy, but then I flow into it. But it needs this process where I just have to contemplate the music, pitch ideas in my head, make perhaps sometimes recordings on my iPhone where I whistle something into it or something. But I collect all these little bits, and then at some point it's ready, like a plant that's growing. So I would describe it like that. Yeah.
I wish violin playing were like that.
I wish piano playing was like that.
Okay, so that's my next question. I think Elisabeth told me that you were a pianist, or you are a pianist, and so I'm very curious about this as well. So, as a performer, you deal with other people's music, I assume, not just your own. And do you find that the two things kind of coexist nicely, like performer-composer, or do you have kind of two sets of, like two brains almost, that one goes this way and one is this way, and when they mesh, what is that like when you play your own music?
I mean, I am a pianist. I would call myself an active pianist, but I feel less like a pianist right now than ever in my life, because I haven't given concerts for a really, really long time. I mean, live concerts, and I'm sure that other musicians feel the same. We feel like there's something untrained there. I mean, I can practice, I do practice, but without a goal, it's a different thing. So I feel a bit uneasy at the moment as a pianist. But I am a pianist, and what you ask, the problem to juggle those two things was apparent when I was studying, because I had great professors, and of course each of them, and that was also perfectly right, demanded my full attention. I mean, my piano teachers demanded my full attention, my composition teachers demanded my full attention, and of course also the schools demand full attention to the different curriculums. So this can be very stressful. And I remember that I suddenly, after my studies were finished, and I was just working freelance as a composer and a pianist, and actually, at the beginning, I earned much more money as a pianist, because I actually had jobs where I could play concerts, whereas the composition side is much easier. I mean, much more difficult to earn money, as you know. So it was really important for me to actually play the piano, because it gave me freedom. It gave me freedom to compose. That was a very, very important part after my studies. And after my studies, it really felt great, to be honest, Cecily. I was always very happy that I would experience both of these sides. And I'm very, very thankful that I have the experience how it is to stand on a stage and to perform also pieces by other people. Also to know, we all musicians, we know we're on stage, we're playing something, and we know exactly when is the audience bored, when is it gripped, we know that, we feel that somehow, and sometimes it's our fault, and then we have to correct it as musicians, but sometimes it's also the composition's fault, to be honest. And it was very, very helpful for me to just also play my own music as a pianist at some point and realize these things, and to find the moments where I felt that the communication with the listeners was happening instantly, or where it was more difficult. And that taught me a lot. I was also, very interested, for example, I actually performed as a singer in an opera once, just to experience how it is if you're standing on a stage and you have to look at the conductor and to kind of get it together. Because as a composer, I was very often annoyed with singers who never have any rhythm. It's like, why don't you sing in rhythm? The guy is beating here. Why isn't it in time? And once you're on stage yourself and you do all kinds of actors things on stage, you suddenly realize how difficult it actually is to bring these things together. And that was also very helpful for me. It actually made me very humble as a composer to realize that I was wrong, And so for me, those two things go together. And I never had a situation in my life where, luckily, where I felt that I should answer this question, are you a pianist more or are you a composer more? Right now, in COVID times, I'm probably more of a composer, because that's what I can prepare long-term projects. But without a concert coming up, the need to practice really hard is, of course, not so great. But I find both worlds go together, and we also all know as musicians that the divide between composers and performers happened roughly around Berlioz and Richard Wagner. It's a historical fact. Before that, if you had asked Mozart or Beethoven, are you a pianist or a composer, they wouldn't even have understood the question, because they saw themselves as a musician. And for a musician, it was absolutely normal to be able to play instruments, to conduct, to perform. It was all together. Haydn played all kinds of instruments, and he conducted, he composed. That was his job. So there was no divide. And I think that was a very happy time. Because it made composers more practical. And I don't think practicality, writing for musicians, knowing how they feel when they play, is a really important aspect of composition. You can achieve greatness with abstraction also, but I find that much, much harder than actually experiencing it and learning it by doing. And I would recommend all my students, even if you're not super virtuoso, brilliant on your instruments, keep playing them. Keep playing in ensembles, keep playing in orchestras if you can, just for the experience of it, just to become better composers.
I'd just like to add that Moritz is a super virtuosic, incredible pianist, and we actually met this way, didn't we? We played the Kurtak trio, the homage to Robert Schumann, and I was just so impressed with how every note was filled with blood and love that you played. And so we actually met as performers first, and then we played the Zimmermann piano trio, Présence, with masks.
I also was very impressed with Elisabeth, because this is a piece which is so hard that actually you have recordings where there's only part of the note text is realized. But Elisabeth was always looking at it, and I said, Elisabeth, this part is impossible. It's on the recording with the Kontarski brothers. It's not. They didn't play it, but Elisabeth was also very calmly, let's look. And she was playing it slow. No, it's possible. It's possible.
Slowly, yes.
Possible for her, maybe.
Yeah.
Well, that was actually my next question. How did you meet? So now I know. That's amazing. I'd like to talk about the possible and the impossible idea, and how far and this is maybe for both of you, how far you'll go to push that idea of if something's really possible. I had I think as performers, we tend to doubt our own abilities. At least I do. You look at what you're being asked to do, whether it's Brahms or something brand new, and you think, oh, how can I bring my best to this, and how can I best bring off the page what I'm seeing? And sometimes, you do get to a point where it's like, I don't think I can do this. I can't make this sound. And I know early in my experiences with living composers playing their music, I was very reluctant to say anything like, oh, I don't think I can do this. Because it was always, oh, give me another week. I'll just keep at it. I'll keep doing it. But there maybe are times when something that's being asked is, maybe it's possible, but could the same thing be achieved another way is a question that's worth asking. And in fact, I was hearing a student yesterday who's playing a brand new piece on her postgraduate recital, and with her pianist who was the composer, he had written a tritone trill in a low position for 6 bars. And I just looked at it and I thought, and I could see my student's poor hand cramping. I thought, is there another way to get this same thing across? And she would never have asked, but I'm the loudmouthed American teacher saying, really? Do you really need that? And I questioned him, and he thought about some other things that maybe he could do. But how do you both feel about that process of collaboration between performer and composer?
Yeah, I'd be really interested to hear Moritz's opinion, because I was brought up to think that, if you look at Tchaikovsky concerto or other incredibly famous and pieces that are played all the time, and they were believed to be impossible to play. And so I always feel like, who am I to decide? I just have to keep working until I get it. And I guess my only measure in a way is whether it feels in a way still like violin playing. There's some things that are so abstract and so far removed from the art of violin playing that then it doesn't really feel like a violin piece. But I'd be so reluctant to ask to have something changed, but I wonder if it would be wise to do this more often. What's your opinion?
Yeah, I probably would have answered this question very differently 30 years ago. I think it changes a bit with time and with your experience, and it also has a lot to do with the musicians themselves. I was in the situation like you two, where I also as a pianist had to premiere pieces by composers who didn't have a clue about the piano, which is more common today than 200 years ago, where everybody played piano. But now you have very often composers who actually don't even know how to play a simple sonatina on the piano, so they don't know anything about the problems of piano playing. And the thing is that from my pride as a composer, then I thought, okay, this colleague doesn't have a clue about the piano, but I'm also too proud to say something like you, to say, this is not possible, because it could sound whiny or complaining, So I said, okay, what the heck, I try, And there are some instances in my memory when I actually learned a lot by doing something that at first was really, really awkward and horrible to play, but then it somehow expanded my possibilities. I can give you an example. There was a piano piece by David Lang, who can play a little piano, but doesn't know a lot about the piano, the American composer, you know him, of course. And this is a very early piece, pre-minimal piece called While Nailing at Random. And this piece was a 10-minute orgy of very close-knit cluster chords that you would play very fast, like da 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 da. And then in each of these chords, there were just some notes were changing all the time. So what he wanted was like moving clusters, chromatic, very, very complex chords in both hands, and moving outwards, moving inwards, and always like da 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 da, like this. Yeah. So it was difficult from a technical point to do this repetition, but also to change these chords so quickly. And I practiced this piece for months. It was like a horror etude. My neighbors hated me. My fellow students hated me, because the piece was also really aggressive and very loud and ugly. That's what he wanted at that time, David. But I learned a lot. But just persevering and trying to do it as good as possible. I think I never played this piece perfectly, because it was just impossible to play. But I came closer in a spiritual sense to achieving it, and it actually made me grow in a way as a performer, and that was good. But on the other hand, now with my experience and also how dumb composers sometimes are. You guys have too much respect, Elisabeth. Sometimes composers just write something, like even Beethoven did that, and they just say, what the heck, I just try. If the musician will complain, and we know that Beethoven's violinists complained famously, he just, okay, I just do it. Let's see. I mean, Beethoven did these things in his piano sonatas as well, of course, yeah. And now pianists can play it. That's the strange thing, because now you take Beethoven very seriously, and then you practice the Hammerklavier Sonata, and then it's possible to play. But of course, he always touches the impossible. And I think Beethoven was probably reluctant to take criticism, but nowadays, if I write for an instrument that I don't know well, or even if I write for Elisabeth, and Elisabeth comes to me and says, Moritz, this tritone trill, I don't know if that works so well in this passage. I would actually listen to her, and I would not be completely against changing a certain aspect of a piece if I realize that even a high-class performer will have difficulties with it, and that will hinder a certain kind of expression that I want. Elisabeth gave a wonderful example with the Berg concerto, which is of course very overnotated, but actually we all know that Berg wanted this flowing, extreme, expressive, not adhering to any boundaries kind of violinist style. And the only way he could achieve it, because this was before graphical improvisational notation, he had to overnotate it. But you have to somehow look behind the many, many markings in the notes and find this freedom again. And this might actually, and this is sacrilege, I know, this might actually mean that you play a passage less exact than he writes. But if you understand the spirit from how he writes it, I think he would have been very happy. And there are moments when I feel that musicians understand what I do, and it's perhaps not the most perfect rendition of it, but they understand what I spiritually wanted, emotionally wanted to express. Then that actually will impress me as well. I'm not the person who's saying, okay, this intonation here is awkward or something, because I'm more interested in how it is expressed in general. Yeah, and there's many anecdotes with composers who are not so worried about wrong notes, but more worried about the interpretation. Like my teacher Kilmay, he was never worrying about if you played a note wrong, but he was very, very strict if you played it wrong. Musically, he was really, really strict. Kurtak is known to be really precise with how it is played in how he wants it. So there are different composer types as well. But in the end, to put it short, communication is everything. So composers should talk, living composers should talk to living musicians, and that's great.
All right. Well, I would like to hear some living music here. So, I have this beautiful video of Elisabeth to share, but could one of you introduce the piece? This is
I don't want to talk all the time. So this is actually wonderful. The video that we are seeing is a wonderful birthday surprise that Elisabeth did for me. And she just, without announcing it, I had sent her this music of this violin cycle that I did, which was a project for the Kronberg Academy. And they did a Beethoven cycle where they had all the violin sonatas, and they wanted a composer to compose pieces in between these violin sonatas. So I did the cycle where for every Beethoven sonata, I would write a piece, a companion piece that could be played before by the soloist then. And the cycle is called Mir mit dir in German. And this is a part of the famous letter to the Unsterbliche Geliebte that Beethoven wrote. He had this mysterious love affair where there are all these theories. And there's a beautiful line where it says, it was Mir mit dir, which is difficult to say. Me with you is not the best translation, no? It's poetic German, let's put it like that. It's a love expression. And what I try to do in the cycle is to use compositional material that Beethoven might have used. So very often it is actually very tonal, without ever citing his music or using direct quotes. There are some rare instances where I wrote something like an intro into the sonata so that it could be played immediately. But most of the time these pieces are independent. But I try to get into the spirit of Beethoven and realize something that would sound perhaps like if Beethoven lived today. I mean, I don't have delusions of grandeur, but it's just as an idea, and would write for the violin solo, which he did not do, and that is the attempt. And Elisabeth plays one of the movements, number, what was it again? I mean, you know your piece better than me. Number 3, yeah, of the 10 pieces. So it's actually the companion piece for the 3rd violin sonata. And perhaps you can add something, Elisabeth, from your playing experience.
I was actually working on the 3rd Beethoven sonata, and so it was drawn to it naturally, but I also just instantly loved the opening. I just loved the sound of it and the lines in it, and the beauty of it and the warmth. And so I was choosing a solo piece to go with the premiere of your violin viola concerto. That's also going to be on the same program, and I just picked that one because I loved it. And I think it's also really very enjoyable to play. It's demanding, but in a really violinistic way. So I love that about it as well. And it really sounds like in this style of Beethoven or a contemporary, but then occasionally it will totally branch out and be very you, and be also very passionate and very much not a classical piece, but then it returns to the opening, and I think it's so beautiful in that way that it goes to an extreme and then returns to something really warm.
All right. Well, I'm looking forward to it. So this is the third. Is it a movement? You call it the third movement of Moritz Eggert's cycle, Mir mit dir.
Such a beautiful opening.
This is just so beautiful. That is a first. It has to, it had to wait till the very last really big class for something like that to happen. I'm sure Mark will sort it out in a second. But yeah, it's just extraordinary. No wonder you fell in love with that opening.
This leads us directly to Sciarrino, who apparently is so interested in silence.
Okay, Mark says, all right, let's give that another try. Sorry about that.
Okay. Thank you, Elisabeth. Es war wirklich ein schönes Geschenk. Very nice present. I was waking up on my birthday and I had this video in my inbox. So it was a really nice surprise.
That's just beautiful. I've watched it about 4 times today, and I could continue to. It's really beautiful, both the playing and the piece, and the idea behind it as well. I love the idea of the introductions to the Beethoven sonatas. I'd love to hear that cycle. You mentioned, Elisabeth, that you were programming this alongside the concerto. Before we get to the Sciarrino and Matthew's performance, do you want to tell us a little bit about this concerto, and is that what you're currently working on together, your most recent collaboration?
Yes, this is the really exciting project that has been in the air for
Yes.
a long time because of Corona. Actually the premiere has been postponed for the second or third time at this point, and is now scheduled for November 1st. And it's something that I have never experienced, because it's actually going to be both a violin and a viola concerto. And as I understand, in 5 movements, and 2 of them have been composed. They appeared in my inbox all of a sudden. And it's going to be a patchwork commission, and Moritz will add on to it as we go.
Yeah, it was the whole idea of the piece came actually from the project that you proposed it for the Hamburger Camerata. They want to do a Prometheus concert where they do Prometheus by Beethoven also, so it was also connected to Beethoven. And they wanted something to address also, I mean, topics like climate change and how we destroy the planet. And so it's a lot of heavy topics going into this concert. Also, viola violin concerto for Elisabeth. She's also playing in the orchestra, and how can we do this? So I decided to somehow write something that can be included in the Prometheus piece by Beethoven, and so that it can be played, and then in the middle suddenly Elisabeth stands up and plays one movement, and then she sits down again. She's concertmaster again. I hope that's still the plan. I was so inspired by Beethoven's still relatively unknown piece. Most people haven't heard it. That I actually also decided to do something about Prometheus, but I was also inspired by famous Alan Moore, the famous British comic writer, and so the piece will be called Promethea. So it's a female Prometheus in a way, and the 2 movements that we have already are connected to the story, and also, of course, to, as you know, the Frankenstein novel by Mary Shelley is also inspired by Prometheus. What Prometheus means is that the modern Prometheus is the original title, not Frankenstein as we know it. So a lot of these things come together, and I really like this topic, and it inspired me greatly. And I hope that I will be able to write the 3 movements soon, because I'm really looking forward to it. My daughter is appearing as a ghost here. She's curious what's happening here.
It was very she melded into your virtual background in a very creepy way. That was kind of cool, and kind of from the underworld. Violin and viola in one concerto. How is that for you?
I have no idea. You have to ask Elisabeth. I don't know how she physically manages to do it, but she can, apparently. Yeah.
Well, I mean, they're separate movements, so I get to put down one instrument and pick up the other. Yeah.
That's a relief. Not 2 at once.
Yeah, but I just imagine how it would be like to play on this really tiny. I mean, actually, I can do that in a way. I mean, it's possible for a pianist to play on a Mensur, we say in German, like the spaces between the keys are smaller on a toy piano, for example, and you still can play Beethoven and stuff. It's just a matter of the brain has to switch. I guess it's similar on the viola, even though it's still very impressive to just find these pitches somewhere on the string, and to get into this different system. As a pianist, I still have the keys, but you have nothing. Yeah.
Yeah, but but I'm very used to it because I do it a lot. I program a lot, violin and viola in one concert, or I used to when there were concerts.
Well, hopefully.
But I mean, if you write the two parts to be played simultaneously, I will have to think about whether I break my rule of never asking a composer to change anything.
Well, maybe by November I can come to Germany and hear it, and that would be amazing.
Yeah, that would be great.
I would love that. I think this would be a good point to maybe move on and get into the masterclass part of our time together. The next performer is Matthew, and one of the best things that's come out of this month for me personally is I've been introduced to new music. So I did not know the Sciarrino Caprices before about 3 weeks ago. And he is going to play the second of these 6 Caprices. It is definitely good that we can do this with a shared video because it is all harmonics and fluty sounds and not at its best over Zoom. So hopefully we'll be able to, he sent a beautiful performance and we'll hear it just fine. And then I'm going to turn things directly over to Moritz and Elisabeth. I'll get out of the way and you can just decide between you who wants to take the helm and unmute yourselves when that's the right thing to do. But this is the second of the Caprices. I think these were written in 1976 by Salvatore Sciarrino.
Bravo. Very interesting piece. Yeah. But Elisabeth, you're the violinist. You have to start. I feel shy saying something.
Me too, actually. Yeah, so bravo. It must be so hard to get this to speak, and I think you're doing such a wonderful job with it and really getting the harmonics to sound. And it has a beautiful atmosphere already. But I was thinking to take it further. It looks to me more flowing than it sounds right now. So in other words, I see very few like commas or places to actually stop the sound, and I wonder if it would be possible to kind of move through the bow with more like a sense of like a windy feeling or an airy feeling, so that actually your sound continues all the time. It could help also to count. I wonder how what your like what your physical approach is to it. If like, do you feel that you're riding on some kind of a pulse, or what's it like?
I think I tried to. I'm not sure if I'm successful, but that's the idea. Yeah, I think.
Uh-huh. I think I can hear that, and that the pulse is quite stable, and it's beautiful in that way. I just wonder if it could be more continuous. And I've never tried to play this, but for example, just technically, you're changing the bow in the beginning always, right? At the top of the hairpin. Is it possible to do it in one bow?
Yeah.
Like the softer ones that only go to mezzo forte or mezzo piano at the highest.
Yeah.
Do you want to try it?
It kind of feels, I don't know, more natural.
It feels more natural. Yeah. And I wonder, this may be totally a Zoom thing, but I'd love to hear more difference. Like, so the first swell goes to piano, then the next to mezzo forte, then the next one is only to pianissimo. And so they're all a little bit different, and they could be telling a story like that. And I wonder if you could play ones all the way to the first comma, which is, after the first forte, and to really bring that out as the biggest swell. Also, I was wondering, and I don't know if this works, but what would happen if you used really lots of bow, like even to niente, if you went almost to the frog, going back to niente, so that you would use an airier contact. You're using only part of the bow.
Yeah. Do you mean like on all of them, or just when the sort of louder ones, the stronger ones?
I would say more bow on all of them, but less bow on the ones that don't get so loud in the middle, and more bow on the ones where you want to open up, because they always start in the same niente point, right? So it's a matter of how much you open them. So try once as an experiment to really waste a lot of bow. Matthew, I was wondering if you could keep the just, and we're experimenting here, but if you didn't break the slurs, maybe until the very last one that's that's, so long at the beginning of the second line. Do you know what I mean? So you would just do the original bowing, but with more bow. So you would use also the lower half of the bow. And then I'm still wondering if all the small phrases, if you could think of like a thread through them or a breath through them, so you don't stop at every niente, but it's just this very, very short moment where there's no sound, but you go right back into the sound until you get to the comma. And I think there you can really breathe and take time. Yeah, that's the idea. And I would keep working on connecting it even more. And it's interesting. I was working on some spectral music recently, a piece by Tristan Murail and some other things. And there's this reminds me so much of it, just in the sense that it's basically one sound idea that is explored throughout the whole piece. And I think it's so important to find a way to tell a story and to make a continuum out of it, so it doesn't feel like a static, beautiful thing, but it's still a story or something that moves in time, if that makes any sense.
No, I know what you mean. I think it's easy to get bogged down in just like translating what he's written down, that I sort of forget about the actual just the connectedness and length of the bigger phrase, basically.
Yeah.
May I say something as a composer?
Yes.
Actually, what Elisabeth said is the same thing that I immediately thought also when I listened to it, that it should have this kind of flowing aspect more. But I also feel for you, Matthew, because this is a piece that is extremely difficult to convey via Zoom, I guess, because sometimes I see the bow moving on the violin and I see that you're physically still playing, but we don't hear it anymore because the sound seems to cut off a little. So I think it's really difficult to convey that over Zoom. This is an interesting example. We were talking about notation before and impossible things. I think this is an interesting example. I mean, Sciarrino is a great composer, but where the composer's intention shoots itself in the foot a little by notating these dal niente and al niente crescendi and decrescendi. He kind of actually makes you play it like that you make pauses, because if you take it really seriously, dal niente means to nothing. So you think of a nothing in between. And I agree with Elisabeth that this is kind of works against the flow of the piece, because for the listener of this piece, the beauty of this piece is like to have these scintillating harmonics and to have this gentle flow. And he actually, and that is very important, important thing that Elisabeth said, he does give you points where you have to stop. The breathing marks are pretty clear. And I think that those can be exaggerated even, yeah? There can be a longer silence, yeah? An interesting aspect, I don't know if you thought about this, this is my composer scrutiny. He makes a point, I try to show it, I mean, it was not really possible here with this thing. Okay, but let's forget that. But you know that sometimes he writes these crescendi and decrescendis like very diagonal more, yeah? And then sometimes they go to the dal niente and then appear again, like in the fifth phrase, you know, they are connected. Do you see that?
Yeah.
He sometimes does that and he sometimes doesn't. And I think he does it on purpose. He wants that these two phrases, for example, the mezzo piano phrase, the fourth phrase, and the fifth phrase, he wants them to be together. So he writes the bowing, he writes the slur, and I think he means the bow, of course, but these two elements belong together for him as a phrase. this could be an idea that you could explore to make the music more plastic, to make it more, to have tiny differences, because I think that's, as Elisabeth said, this piece explores one idea very, very obsessively in a way, but these tiny differences make all the difference in the interpretation. And there are several moments when he connects these crescendos and decrescendi. And this could be something interesting to explore, yeah. So that you have these phrases, and perhaps there is a tiny break in between, because you basically lift the bow slightly from the strings, but you start to play again immediately. And I think another thing to consider is the tempo, which Elisabeth also mentioned. He uses a notation where there is never a real one. It's always like there's a 3/8, but it's always da, 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 da. So he wants this gentle flowing feeling that for the listeners there is not really a beat or an audible waltz or 3/8 or whatever. But he does have moments when he writes a tempo suddenly, or rubato. On page 2, there's a poco ritenuto in the middle of a tremolo, basically, which is very, very interesting idea. How do you play a ritenuto there? And you probably should take this very seriously. So the ritenuto here I would interpret as, on page 2, really as also a slowing of the movement of the bow. Yeah, could mean that. So that you really have an a tempo, which means that you start the trill on page 2 with the a tempo faster than the movement you have before, so that you really make an effort to, this is faster, and then again faster in the più rapido on in the 4th line. Yeah, that's again, even though it's pianissimo, it should have this kind of yeah, this is even faster, yeah, than you already play. And he has all these tempo differences, especially at the end of the piece, which for me signifies that he wants this kind of bring it to an extreme, and so where it cannot be. I mean, he uses more extreme dynamics. It goes to pianissimo all the time, but at the same time he wants you to play faster. So it's like the music is vanishing. It's like so thin in the air that you can barely see it anymore. This would perhaps be a good image for it. Yeah. So these things, I think, are interesting images that you can use to make the performance more plastic.
Yeah. Should I just give it a quick go from that?
Yeah. Pleasure.
Yeah.
And also there's a big forte and even a fortissimo in the piece, no? The climax, if I go by dynamics, the climax of the piece is page 2, first line, first half. You have the fortissimo on this one. This is the loudest point in the piece, if I'm not wrong, no? Oh, no, there's another fortissimo on page 1. I'm wrong. Yeah, but these are the two only ones, no?
There's one on the second line of the second page as well, just after that.
Okay. Yeah, so you should make an effort to make these moments really come out, because they are the extremist moments in this piece. Difficult to do with harmonics, I know, but he means it intentionally, I think. He means the intention should be fortissimo.
So I'll just go from that first poco ritenuto. Yeah. It's hard with the if you do it in one bow, you kind of end up which I guess.
Yeah, I think it would be totally impractical to be in the lower half for the tremolo. That's for sure.
Yeah.
So go ahead and divide, break the slurs when that's uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Hmm? Elisabeth, your mic is on.
I thought you wanted to say something.
No, I wanted you to say something. Yeah.
Yeah, I think these are all great points, and fun to explore, going into more dynamic extremes. I wonder if there's a way to be even more comfortable going to the lower half. I mean, not in the places where you have tremoli,
Yeah.
but if we go back to the beginning one more time, and I'm wondering if just am not catching the softest part, but to me the music still stops and starts
Yeah.
much of the time, even in the places where, like the first little phrase, the niente signs, they're on top of each other, they're not, the swells are not completely connected, but it still really looks like there's supposed to be no rest. And so in a way, I think physically playing this, it could feel like you've come off the ground and you're not touching the ground. If you were not playing at all, you were touching the ground. So if you can feel like you're flying the whole time until the first comma, the first breath mark, and to really kind of go for it with going to the lower half, and you can make your right elbow feel like a hot air balloon and be very, very light, even if you're in the lower half. I'd love to see that. Yeah, I think you got some really beautiful connections now. That's wonderful, and I, I think the way to imagine it would be to hear the new sound already while you're playing the one that you're playing, and so almost as if the two sounds are melting into each other, and just to go very briefly to this moment of silence, but to keep continuing. Listening ahead or singing ahead, and I thought you did it beautifully now.
I'm going to be very rude and interject. Would you mind playing? I'm really curious to hear one of the really loud bits, like the very brief fortissimo bits again, just to have another sort of chance to hear it. Would that be possible?
Yeah, sure. So this is the fortissimo on the first page, halfway down on the third line.
Thank you. I just really wanted to hear it again. And I'm curious how to make that loud. I would have a hard time figuring that out.
Yeah, I just find it's really hard to do it without getting that sort of sound. Which I think in the last one on the second page, the second line.
Perhaps a trick by my old piano teacher helps. I mean, he used to Leonard Håkansson. He used to accompany students with Pablo Casals. He told me once, and Pablo Casals was notoriously against pianists playing loud, and he actually put the grand piano into a big carpet so that he wouldn't hear anything. And he told me that there were rehearsals where he actually didn't press down a key, and Casals said, "Okay, now this is really good." He didn't play at all. But there are some tricks to make something that doesn't come out as fortissimo, because of course it's physically impossible to reach a fortissimo with a harmonic like this and to not become scratchy or this. But you can make a gestural fortissimo. Pianists know this trick that if I play chamber music with a piano trio, for example, and I know I play Tchaikovsky or whatever, and it's too loud, then I sometimes will make a big movement, but not really play loud. It's like, this already can convey a forte for the audience. So in this piece, which I imagine, I mean, it's so beautiful how you have these different little gestures, and it's kind of always flowing. But then if you have you can even make it a fortissimo by bringing over a more gestural, strong gesture for this bit, even though you don't physically play louder, but you can make it sound louder by imaging it in a way. Could be possible. It's just a stupid idea, perhaps. But
I also wonder if he doesn't know. I mean, maybe some scratchiness is actually welcome or allowed.
Yeah.
You could go for it.
A composer as meticulous as Sciarrino, who's a very, very meticulous composer, would probably, if he wanted quasi fortissimo, he would put it in quotes or something, as sometimes it's done. When you have a dynamic that is not possible to be realized, but the composer writes it's ideally fortissimo, but it's not. Lachenmann does that often, for example, where he knows that it's not fortissimo. Mm-hmm. But here he writes fortissimo, and I think that Sciarrino might have. He surely knows the violin well, and he probably knows what happens if you play harmonic tremolo in fortissimo. So a bit of risk-taking, I agree with Elisabeth, a bit risk-taking is also possible.
Yeah.
Even if the sound is not as refined as before.
Great. And also what you did now, you went closer to the bridge. You could explore this even more, because then, of course, you get a more piercing, brighter, more direct sound.
Yeah.
That sounds cool. I'm curious, how did you start learning this? Does one first work on it without the trills, or what's the best way to get a feeling for it?
Yeah, I started. The hardest thing I found was that actually doing the harmonics together, because if I start here without that, I automatically think, because you'd think the D string is higher.
Yes.
The other way around. So just figuring out like what sound is where for me,
yes.
without the trills was sort of the foundation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I have a question for you as well. I received this wonderfully huge, amazing, very red score in the mail yesterday, but I was expecting there to be a key, like the little composer's cheat sheet that tells you what the different markings meaning, and there isn't one in my copy. Are there special meanings for that you know of, Matthew, for the different tremolos or like that marking? Is it just normal, as we would expect?
I assumed, just normal. I think.
Okay.
But I think Moritz's idea, where he plays with the tempo, it affecting the trills and the tremolos, I think that's probably quite significant. That I overlooked. Yeah.
That's a very I like that thought very much, that the ritenuto could actually have to do with the speed of the tremolo that you're playing, and then the a tempo is the speed of the trill that you pick it up with. I'm asking because last week, with the piece that Clifton wrote for Michelle to play in the class last week, he used a number of very interesting notations for the different kinds of tremolo that he wanted. Some of them were sort of this way, some of them were this way, and some of them were normal. And he also used it wasn't a metered time. It was I don't remember what he called it. It was all proportional notation, which I wonder if in 1976 maybe that wasn't what Sciarrino was doing, but it has a little bit of that feeling. We should move on, but Matthew, I want to be sure you have a chance to ask any questions if you have any.
No, I think we've kind of covered everything. Yeah, I was going to ask about just practicalities of like harmonics and dynamics and how that. Oh, I tell you what. We've talked about getting extreme fortes and fortissimos. What about pianissimo and below? I mean, do less, or sort of, again, I suppose that idea of physically being a dynamic as well is applicable there.
This is actually something I think about a lot in all music, like when a Brahms sonata, for example. I think it's always, or Beethoven crescendo. The crescendo is always something we're so drawn to somehow, and often when there's a swell, we go to the high point of the swell, and then we kind of drop the energy. And I think it's so important to really listen to the decrescendo and shape it in the same way that we shape the crescendo. And I think this would probably, I'm sorry I didn't think of it before, but I think it can help you continue into the next phrase always, by just really listening to how your sound gets softer.
Yeah.
As much as you're listening to how it's getting stronger.
And also an idea for playing the piece in a different way. Also, it might help to listen to yourself more instead of looking at the music, because I think the difficulty of this piece is that it, on first glance, it looks like a typical contemporary music piece, even atonal in a way, just from looking at the stopped notes. But because it's all harmonics, actually the result is this really sweet music. I mean, if you just look, if we would notate it, what the sounds that we actually hear, it's more like could be even like alpine instruments or whatever. It's like, it's very tonal, you know. It's very sweet, very beautiful. It's actually a very positive piece, I find, you know. And if you listen to that, this is what the audience listens to. You look at the technical side of it as a violinist, but the result is actually something different. It's very tricky. I know it's very, all these trills and bow changes, you know, lots of things about, but the result is actually surprisingly simple, the sound result. And that's what you should go for, because what is actually happening in the piece? What is the listener perceiving in this piece? And that might help the interpretation a little, so that it has this kind of very gentle, you know, very sweet air, like a little friendly wind that comes through, you know.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Matthew, for bringing this wonderful miniature gem to the really big class. And Moritz, I love that. It sounds like wind chimes, that like you're going through the mountains almost, and hearing sort of this carrying through the valley, like just a wisp of it. That's maybe, you know, the next village.
It reminds you a bit like a windspiel, you know, something that is on a house or something, and it has these little bells or something, and you just hear it barely from afar. There's some hut in the mountains or something.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Thank you. And I think we'll jump back in time, but not so far back in time, to the first movement of the Debussy Sonata. So this is a performance by Eliette Harris, and it's the first movement of Debussy Sonata. One of my favorite pieces to listen to and play. So here we go. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Beautiful. Moritz, you're the composer. You go first.
Yeah, I mean, I'm astonished about these. We're going back in time, but also in a way we're going forward when looking at Debussy. I mean, I love this way he is completely free of anything you would expect from a sonata normally, and it's like a completely different piece. There are moments when it reminds me a lot of also Tzigane by Ravel. It has these gypsy moments in a way. And even though the score looks very conventional in a way, how it is notated, the way it sounds is, of course, very different. It sounds like an improvisation most of the time. And I think this aspect is the one that is most worthwhile working on, to have this, I still have it here, to have this free-flowing, first of all, you still have a sense of tempo, but at the same time, you like completely free of it. There were some moments, so sadly, I just closed the score, so I cannot really tell you the bar number. But there were some moments where I had the feeling that the way you start a passage together could be more pronounced, where you were going, it's like the violin was a bit early, the piano a bit later. I mean, these tiny little things that are, of course, always a problem in a duo. But where this piece really profits of doing these moments where you begin something really well together, actually makes a real difference in the interpretation. Yeah? So that it really sounds like one instrument coming together. Yeah? This would be my first thought of the interpretation. I will have to find the score again. Elisabeth?
Yeah, I actually enjoyed a lot about both of your performance, and it was fun to hear Moritz talk about the improvisation aspect of it, and because at first glance it seems so flowing all the way through, but when I think about it more deeply, I feel that there are great contrasts, and maybe this could be along the same lines of what you're saying. And I wonder if we could explore this idea of so the spontaneity of it, or the improvisatory quality of it. For example, I mean, I think there are just so many opposites in a way, like the G minor chord and the C major chord. They say it all in the beginning anyway. And then we have the piano going in one meter and the violin going in another meter, like a 3-2 rather than 3-4 or 6-2 even. And so there's that contrast, and there's a contrast between really deeply sad or melancholic, and really bright and also proud and fiery at the end, and actually the same one motive grows from being kind of introverted or sad or dark into this really fiery thing. So the motives are developed in a really fantastic way, and I think it would be great to bring. So what I'm thinking of right now is this. This when it first appears, but then at the end, it's so proud and so strong and fiery, and I think you could play with these extremes more. So if we look at the beginning, it sounds. I think the music could be more fragmented. In other words, the piano is doing one thing, and then the violin starts another thing, and there are all these stopping points, like a 9 or before 15, bar 15. But then in bar 15, I think is one of those places maybe that Moritz also you're talking about, where the music really moves together and the pulse is one and the dynamic shape is one, and you could make more of this feature of really moving together until 22. Would you like to try that? I could really hear you moving together from 15 on now, and you could experiment with how much of the en serrant you wanted to do, but I think you were really beautifully moving together. I wonder if in the beginning, this idea of the darkness and light could be more apparent, even just in the two piano chords. So you present the two extremes in just the first two things that you do. And then the violin, of course, this is a rising idea, but then the violin has a descending idea. And maybe, Ellie, I would be careful not to be too loud on the tenuto in 8. So you're still in a kind of in a descending idea. Mm-hmm. And I also liked better, but I think you could make even more of it. This idea that you're kind of almost stopping in 11, going into 12, and then picking up the music again. So just really listening to the fragmented nature of it before you get to this bar 15. Was I frozen?
Sorry. Can you hear me okay? Is the Wi-Fi okay here?
Everything's going just... Everything's perfect, Eliette. It
Okay,
sounds
great.
really good.
Just double checking.
And before you play, I just wanted to say a welcome to Stephen Gutman. Thank you very much for making time to join us in the class. And I know your schedule must be absolutely mad with recitals and everything that goes on at the end of term. So thank you for being here.
Thank you. You're welcome.
So do you want to try the beginning one more time with those ideas in mind? Cool. Yeah. Bravo! I think you did it so beautifully, both of you. The whole opening, I enjoyed that very much. I just interrupted because I thought, or this would be interesting to hear your opinion on 38. Are you hearing this bar measure 38?
Do you have any figures in your score by any chance?
So this. I hear this as a new start, and I'm hearing from you more that you land on it. But I think those two gestures again could be more taken sort of out of context from the previous bars. You've been going with the continuous eighth notes and also in the piano. But now these two swells are almost like interruptions. I hear them. And then again, a huge interruption dynamically with the sforzatissimo, a burst of energy. And so I wonder if there could be more of a kind of a spontaneous or improvisatory feel to it, that it doesn't just kind of happen in time, but it's a new idea and another kind of breath on the second swell, and then another new thing on the sforzatissimo, and then it's moving again in a more flowing way.
Yeah.
You could try that, and then I'll hand over to Moritz.
And in addition to what Elisabeth is saying, following the same line of thought, if I analyze the score as a composer, I think that Debussy, when he wants it to be in tempo, with you two being really together in a strict rhythm, he actually uses rhythms that are very clear. So the piano's on the one, there's a two, there's a three, you play da 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 dee da da, then it's there. And the moments when he doesn't want that, for example, the beginning, like Elisabeth correctly said, where as a listener you don't even know what tempo the piece is in. You know, the piano plays two chords, you come in, is it a triplet? Is it a 2/4 bar? At first you can't hear it. And these are the moments when I think he gives you freedom as a performer to gestalten it in German. You know the word gestalt. And a minor detail, Eliette, you play in the a tempo on the first page. You already do a ritardando immediately after starting. The piano plays this F minor chord, and you play da da di da di da 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 di da, and you try to lead into the dolce vibrato. Don't. Because I think here he writes a tempo. He wouldn't have written it if he only wants it for one bar. I think 2 bars at least. Yeah. So I think it's much more surprising, interesting if you, following the line of thought of Elisabeth, something new begins. And there are very often moments in this piece where something new begins, and you play da da di da di da 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 da, and suddenly something new is happening in the piece. There are several moments like this, I think, where traditionally you would think, this should have a slight ritardando, but it's more interesting if it doesn't have this. Yeah, if you have contrast, strong, stark contrast between very gentle, very flowing, very free, and very marcato, very in rhythm. Yeah.
Yeah. Shall I play from the start again, or from where's best?
Maybe from a tempo.
From a tempo.
beautiful. Um, at this moment, at the listesso, it's a bridge going into this next section, right? So I wonder if Eliette, if you could make more of this idea of one idea rising and the softer one falling, and then he takes the same idea but moves it rhythmically, and then there are these slides, like these gypsy slides, and so he transforms what he presented a few bars ago, and I think you could be more creative with the color of the sound here and the way you develop the music into the double bar with the four sharps. Also, something I thought in the whole movement, but you could experiment with it here, is the speed of vibrato or the timbre of the different strings. So when you play on the G string in this quiet dynamic, I think it could be with less vibrato and less fast vibrato. But then as you open up, so in the long swell before the ritardando, I think you could heat up the vibrato a little bit and get more narrow and kind of shimmery and bright on the B flat before the big shift, just to really react to what the strings offer, what the different registers or the different timbres of the four strings offer. But do you want to try it again? Sort of you take this cell and transform it until you get to the double bar. From Listesso tempo.
Shall I do two before?
Yes.
I thought you did it so beautifully at the end. I wonder if the first two phrases could be even more different with this. Kind of a much sweeter and much more sort of inward, gentle answer. And I think, Moritz, you wanted to say something, but you were muted.
Yes, it was my mistake. I just wanted to say that the passage before the Listesso tempo that you just started is another passage where I would try out to not slow down so much, because the instinctive thing that we musicians always do, if we have a diminuendo, we also have a ritardando, and it's sometimes we have to think against that. I think, for example, that you enlarge the music before the appassionato makes perfect sense, because you have to make the sound bigger and you have to reach the appassionato. And I think the rubato that you did was very, very beautiful. Perhaps we can try, if you have these 4 bars before the Listesso tempo. He wants the same tempo, but then, as Elisabeth correctly said, the music is very expressive and very free from that point on. But it's in the same. It starts in the same tempo as before. So if you slow down before, even though there is a temptation with these to make it more expressive, the real expressive bit only starts there. I think these octaves are not so important in the composition than you might think. As a composer, I can see that he just wanted to have this transition, and actually the chords and the piano make the transition to create this new atmosphere here. So perhaps no ritardando at all, actually, before.
Okay.
Would be my suggestion. Yeah.
So I do the 4 bars.
Could we go from the appassionato?
Okay.
Is that okay?
Okay. Yeah. Good. This is such a magical place, I think. And I wonder, you're playing near the fingerboard, but what would happen if you played really literally on the fingerboard and maybe at the expense of the swell, or one can't get quite this loud, but I wonder if you could sound much more like a pan flute than a violin. Do you want to try it by yourself once? Yeah. I mean, if you went really this way. I mean, just to. You still sound to me like a violin. To try really on the fingerboard. That would be cool. I find it very hard to do. I always have to, like, I have to go play like this a little bit. Otherwise, I hit the side of the violin. But if you bow like this, so you're past this little edge, then it actually works quite well. Yeah, and I think he helps you by making the slurs shorter at this moment of the swell. When you can use more bow there. I wonder actually if you could hide the bow changes more in the eighth notes until you get to 92, to the first swell, and kind of not show the bow changes at all. So you really sound like a flute. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's cool.
For me, the most magical moment of the piece is the sudden key change at the meno mosso, the lusingando, the tempo rubato, no? When you suddenly have this new atmosphere. And I think what you do very beautifully, Eliette, is that you don't do any kind of portamento to this B, because it really has to start like a new section, I think. And this was one of the moments when I was at the beginning, when I was talking about where it's really important that piano and violin start exactly together. So like you have a lot of time. He writes in the dolcissimo, the D before, he writes also a little bracket, at least in my edition here. He has a little breathing mark. Do you have that as well?
I think this might actually mark the end of the ritardando.
Exactly, yeah. But it also means, I mean, if he does that as a composer, it also means something new begins.
Yeah.
And you have the time to really like look at each other and start with a so that it's suddenly there. It's like the big minor sudden moment in the Mahler 10th fragment where you suddenly have this it appears suddenly, yeah. There's a sudden mood change in a way, yeah. I mean, not a mood change in the way you play, but a mood change harmonically, yeah. And that is really very, very beautiful if it's perfectly together at this moment, yeah.
Yeah.
Shall we go on a little in the piece?
I hate to interrupt, but I know that Eliette and Stephen have
you have to go. Okay.
a problem with the end of their time in their room, and I don't want to get anyone in trouble with COVID policies and all that. But is there maybe one more thing that you want to try? That pan flute sound was absolutely extraordinary, so cool. But maybe we have time for one more moment. or not.
It could be fun just to hear the ending one more time with all these new ideas in mind, maybe from Au Mouvement to 1, 2, 3, 204. Oh, you don't have bar numbers.
The mouvement
Before that, or even a few bars before
6.
just the first one. And to hear all these different things at once, because then, of course, in the piano we have this other theme, which I think can be really as thematic as the first theme in the violin. And then we have a beautiful example of the music starting and stopping and then really picking up and getting so fiery and so proud at the end.
That
So
should
if
be
you-
the fifth bar of figure 5, I think.
Very good.
Yeah, cool, great.
Thank you.
Thank you, both of you.
Beautiful playing, Eliette. Stephen, thank you so much. You have a recital coming up, is that right?
Yeah, not till the 21st of June, but yes, coming up. Yeah.
And you're playing this on it?
Yes, yeah, the whole
Fantastic.
thing.
Well, thank you for bringing it and for taking the trouble to get a room and organize everything. I know it's not easy these days to make everything happen, so I really appreciate it. And thank you for playing probably my favorite violin sonata. I love this piece. I love playing it. I love listening to it. It's just an absolutely magical piece. So.
Yeah, thank you so much. That was amazing. Thank you.
Thank you. Before we say goodnight and goodbye and all that, and say goodbye to the really big class, I just want to thank Moritz and Elisabeth again for your time and your energy and your beautiful musicianship, and also for your interaction. I enjoy watching the two of you. I can't wait to sit down with you at some point and meet in person. Any last questions from anyone either in the room or on? If Mark can tell me if there's anyone on YouTube asking anything. And if not, we'll call it a day and a year and wish Moritz a wonderful performance this evening. What are you having performed?
It's actually the first premiere in nearly 2 years, so to speak. Yeah, it's quite amazing. It's a small piece for a recorder solo, actually for a double recorder, special instrument that was made for the performer. And she commissioned this piece 2 years ago, and that's the premiere now. It was supposed to be premiered already 1.5 years ago, but no.
Well, I'm sure,
very much forward to it. Yeah.
I'm sure it'll be brilliant. Is this the same performer who I found something from Wigmore that I posted? Is it the same recorder?
No, this is another piece by me that also uses 2 recorders, but this is actually written for a double recorder. That's like one instrument. So it's a different thing, but I'm kind of infamous in the recorder world for using several recorders at the same time, so I always get these commissions.
Well, I can't thank you enough, and thank you to my listeners and my audience and my supporters and my friends and anyone who has come through the really big class. I hope it's been an inspiring experience. I know it has been for me, And who knows, we may come back. In the meantime, the archive remains on my YouTube channel. I'll make noise about that on my Facebook page. And thank you. Thanks, Elisabeth.
Thank you for having us. It was brilliant.
Thank you, Cecily. It's
And-
been such a pleasure to be a part of this.
We'll end the live stream there. We should be good.
Okay.
Yeah.